We have a voicemail number which you can call anytime that the mood strikes. That number is 2192 David P. Here's a caller asking, okay, maybe Trump is not likely to delay the election, but if he does, who becomes president? It's a good question. Take a listen.
David, hi. I just wanted to call and give you a little bit of a correction on something you said last week when you were talking about Trump's insane tweet about delaying the election. You said that if the situation were that we didn't have an election by January 20th, that Nancy Pelosi would become the president of the United States because Trump's term would expire. Obviously, Mike Pence's term would expire. That first part is right. Their terms expire, but the second part is not. Actually, Nancy Pelosi will also be on the ballot, and her term expires a little earlier in January if there's no election. So the entire House would basically be empty if there were no election. And so Nancy Pelosi would actually not be the president of the United States. The president of the United States would be who's third in line, which would be the president pro tem of the Senate, 86-year-old, actually 87 when he, by that time, Chuck Grassley. So that will be Chuck Grassley, president, an entire House that is completely vacant, and a Senate that is a third vacant, basically.
So it's actually even more complicated than this. So first of all, it is conceivable. Imagine that. So the election is really 50 elections, right? Each state runs an election. It doesn't appear as though Trump can just delay the election from the federal level, but he could ask governors to delay state elections. It could happen that enough state elections are delayed such that there's no winner in the presidential race, but California might have their election and Nancy Pelosi could win. So it's actually, from what I'm reading, conceivable that you might not have enough states running elections to have anybody get to 270 electoral votes. But if California did their election, it's theoretically possible that Nancy Pelosi would be elected to another term. But let's imagine that the House is vacant, okay? It would not be Chuck Grassley. What would happen, from my understanding, and I went over it with producer Pat today a couple of times, there are a bunch of senators who are up for re-election, and it's 1/3 of the Senate. Those 35 seats would all be vacant. So you would have 65 senators left. Because Republicans have way more seats to defend right now than Democrats, the 35 seats that would be open would be mostly Republican seats. This would put the Senate back in Democratic control, at which point they would vote on who becomes Senate pro tem. And usually they go with the most senior senator, which would be Vermont Senator Patrick Leahy. So it's actually even more complicated. If the election were delayed and there were no elections at all, the Senate elections don't happen, that leaves 35 Senate seats vacant, the House is vacant. Okay. The remaining 65 senators, who are more Democrats than Republicans, vote on a new Senate pro tem who becomes president. By history, that would be Patrick Leahy. Knowing that the person would become president, maybe they would vote for someone who's younger than Patrick Leahy. I don't know. But it's like 2 layers more complicated even than that. And hopefully it doesn't come to this. I don't believe that it will. I believe we will have a presidential election. We have a great bonus show for you today. We are going to talk about the new Republican-backed HEALS Act. We'll talk about what's going on in the NBA. We will talk about Americans sneaking into Canada in boats. Yes, we are now the ones doing that. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show.